Morning, and thank you for joining us for our webinar series, Best Practices in Sustaining Evidence-Based Programs Using Data as a Sustainability Tool. This webinar series is presented by the Implementation Specialist team at Penn State EPIS. I'd like to introduce the Implementation Specialist team. Janine Burris, Jordan Joyce, Nicole Wells, and myself, Heather Roberts. We all provide technical assistance around a specific menu of evidence-based programs. We support program readiness, training, manualization of evidence-based programs or program curriculum, model fidelity, evaluation or tracking outcomes, and communicating program impact. Jordan and I will be hosting today's webinar, and Janine is going to be joining in the conversation. This presentation is one of 5 in the webinar series. This slide shows the list of presentation titles and the dates and times of each. Like I mentioned earlier, today we will be presenting on data as a sustainability tool. If you missed the first webinar in the series, you can view the recording on the EPIS website. I'm going to now pass things over to Jordan to get us started.
Thank you, Heather, and welcome everyone. We wanted to start today's topic off with this little comic, and as you see in front of you, there's 2 gentlemen flooded in paperwork, lots going on, and it looks and feels quite overwhelming, while the one gentleman says to the other, get all the information you can, we'll think of use for it later. And this is certainly something that we want to avoid doing when we're thinking of data collection. And this is certainly something that we avoid at EPIS as we are building data collection resources and processes for programs across the state. We want to ensure that data collection should be, it's useful, it's meaningful, and relevant. We do realize, though, that not everyone has the same feelings about data collection in general. So to really help steer the conversation and provide a graphic, we have this continuum for feelings about data collection. So some of you may find yourself on this left side of the continuum where you love data, and you may find yourself saying things like, data really helps us learn and grow, and evaluation is so critical to the success of our projects, or we really can't afford not to be collecting data. Some folks may find themselves more on this right side of the continuum where they really avoid it. And they may have feelings of that data collection is more of a burden, that data collection may slow them down, or they may feel like they can't afford time and resources to actually go through a data collection process. And some folks may find themselves somewhere in the middle of all of that. So we'd like to launch a poll just to get a sense of, for everyone that's participating today, where you're placing yourself on this continuum. So where would you place yourself? Do you find that you really love data collection and you find a lot of value in it? Do you avoid it, or are you somewhere in the middle? Okay, looks like everyone participated. All right, so 33% of you love data, and close to 70% of you find yourselves somewhere in the middle. You probably find value in it, but maybe, you really need to find a lot of use and benefit in it to really appreciate it. So we can certainly understand that. We're going to launch one more poll because we're curious on what your staff, like where they would fall on this continuum. And if you're not a supervisor in that role, you can also answer this for your colleagues. So where do you place your staff or your colleagues on this continuum? Do they love it, avoid it, or are they somewhere in the middle? Okay, I think everyone completed. All right, so 14% love it. And then there's a tie, 43% avoid data and 43% are somewhere in the middle. So more in the middle towards the right-hand side of this continuum. All right, we're gonna stop sharing that poll right now and get back to the PowerPoint. And I'd like everyone to just pause from this activity for a few moments, and we're gonna come back to this. And what I'd like everyone to focus in on, so here are some definitions for sustainability that many of you provided to us during the actual registration process for this webinar series. So I had pulled just a few of the definitions for today, but as you can see, I'm going to focus in on this left-hand gray box. Someone defined sustainability as the ability to continue the good work and positive outcomes of a project once the startup funding is diminished. Over here in this purple box, someone defines sustainability as the planning and continuation of outcomes and the impacting of change beyond initial funding. I'm not going to read through each of these definitions, but all of these that are captured here in front of you today and many others that we had gathered in the registration process are all focused around data collection. And it's necessary in the process to really increase your chances of sustaining your project or your program. So because of its significance in the idea of sustainability and being able to achieve that, how do we really help everyone who's here today and any other stakeholder that you're working with that falls more on this right-hand side of the continuum? How do we move those folks closer to the left side and really find it valuable, meaningful, and relevant? One suggestion that we have, which I have highlighted here in front of you, is to consider changing the terminology. A lot of times, once you say data, people cringe and they have this certain internal negative feeling towards the whole idea of data in general. So rather than saying data, you could consider saying information gathering. So all of the information that you're trying to pull together for your project, how can we make sure that it is useful, meaningful, and relevant? Again, for all of the stakeholders that are involved. And this is our primary goal for today, is that we really need to ensure that we're having those useful and productive conversations with each of our key stakeholders in our communities so that we really know that all of that information that we're gathering is useful for them. And there's a lot of meaning behind it. And you're not just capturing it just to waste people's time. And ultimately, data can and should be used as a sustainability tool. And there's three primary reasons for this, and we have them represented on this slide. The first one has to do with your referral sources for your projects. So if you have a data collection process in place and you're having those meaningful conversations with your referral sources, you can really increase your chances that you have the evidence that proves to them that your program's working. It helps you increase the buy-in from your referral sources, and it increases your referrals to the program, that they will really send more folks your way, more children, youth, and families your way for the program that you're implementing. The second primary reason has to do with your current and your future funders. So if you have the right data collection process in place, then you have the evidence to prove to them that your organization is implementing the model as it was designed, and that it's having an impact, and it's worth funding in your community or school. The third primary reason is your program implementation staff. It's really important that they know that while they're maintaining model fidelity, they're following the model as it was designed, that they are having that positive impact on the population that they're working with. So I'm going to pass things back to Heather. She's going to lead us through an activity.
Thanks, Jordan. Now we are going to put you into breakout rooms for small group discussion. I'm going to encourage one person from the group to be a note taker, and I would encourage using like a Word document because when we come back together, we are going to ask that you copy and paste your ideas into the chat box whenever we come back together. And it will be simple just to sort of use that Word document to do that. So the activity is we want you to think outside of the box in your small groups and generate a list of creative ways to ensure that all of those stakeholders that Jordan had listed, the referral sources, funders, and implementation staff, are all brought together, are all bought in to find data collection useful, meaningful, and relevant. So we are hoping that each one of you or each one of the groups can come up with 3 to 5 specific action steps that can be taken. When we come back, again, we're going to ask for that note taker to share your list in the chat box. And we're going to give you about 20 minutes. So please gauge your discussion accordingly to that amount of time. At the end, we'll bring everybody back. And so, Jordan, if you want to get those breakout rooms ready, go ahead and join your breakout room. We are just waiting. We have about 8 seconds until everyone joins us again. Okay, I think that we are all back. All right, welcome back. Those of you who were note takers, Right now would be a good time to go ahead and copy and paste all of your group's ideas into the chat box. And you can do all of your ideas at once. I'm going to give you a few moments to do that before we move on. All right, I'm seeing some ideas into the chat box now. All right, I'm going to encourage you to the other groups to add your ideas into the chat box as well. I hope that you all had some great discussions while you were in your breakout rooms. Again, you were tasked with thinking outside of the box to come up with specific information important to each stakeholder, referral sources, funders, and program implementation staff. Again, knowing what is important to them will allow for them to be bought in, and they will find data more useful, meaningful, and relevant. So we're going to do a little share out for anyone that feels comfortable speaking up and sharing your ideas for each of the stakeholders. So let's go ahead and start with referral sources. So would anyone like to unmute and share your group's ideas out loud? If you're comfortable, just go ahead and unmute yourself.
And all of the examples provided in the chat and any additional ones as well will be captured on these slides and then shared out with all of you after today.
This is Jackie from Berks. I think what data is meaningful for referral sources is statements from families and participants about how the program was impactful.
Great. Thank you for sharing, Jackie.
Sure.
This is Janet from Clarion County's Promise. We talked about including good information on the number receiving services, successful completion of the program, if a participant left early, the reasons why they left early. Also potentially doing follow-up 3 to 6 months down the road. How's the family doing? Have they stayed on tasks? Have they had any regression or things that come up? Those sorts of things I think are important for the referral sources to know.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else before we move on to the next source? Okay, we'll go ahead and we will move on to your ideas on what data is useful, meaningful, and relevant for current and future funders. Does anyone want to share aloud? Just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Jackie from Berks. I think for current and future funders, it's important to report number of participants served as well as knowledge and skills gained. That's captured in like pre-post.
Great. Yes. They're very important. Thank you for sharing. And then finally, we will move on. What specific ideas did you come up with on what data is useful, meaningful, and relevant for program implementation staff? Who would like to share aloud for this one?
Our group talked about how important it was for staff to know the outcomes. That way they know what they did really well in, and maybe what areas or topics that they maybe didn't fully explain very well, or maybe didn't go into as deeply as they might have thought they did. So give staff knowledge of what they can improve for next round.
Awesome. Thank you again, Jackie. Anyone else? All right, well, like Jordan mentioned, we will be putting the ideas that you entered into the chat box into each of these slides in the PowerPoint before we send it out. So you've all shared some really great ideas that will be beneficial. In preparing for this webinar, our team came up with a list of recommendations for when you are using data as a sustainability tool. And Jordan is going to share them with you.
All right, so here are a few recommendations from us as we're wrapping up today's webinar. So the first one is to be sure to maintain fidelity monitoring because program drift happens. So continuing collecting that fidelity data, completing those session checklists really helps your program implementation staff avoid program drift and ensures the participants are being delivered all of that content that's included in the project, in the research that has the evidence behind it that's proven to have the outcomes. The second recommendation is to meet with each stakeholder and find out what they want to know about your program. And that will really help you have a starting point for what will be useful for them in relation to your current needs and future needs as you're continuing with your program. Another recommendation is to fold those additional pieces of information that people want to know, fold them into your current processes, paperwork, or systems that you already have in place so that it doesn't feel like more of a burden for them. The next one is review your data often and make that a permanent practice to pull it all together and share it out with each of your stakeholders. The next one is to, after you pull it all together, make sure that you're identifying those strengths, the things that had gone really well with your project and your program, and celebrating that. And at the same time, balancing what those goals, next steps, areas of improvement might be for you into the future. The next one is to really get creative with all of the information that you're collecting and try and engage with Canva to develop any type of flyer, outcome report, social media post. I have this link here for you so that you'll have access to it. And it's a tutorial provided by a staff at EPIS. And she offers a lot of information on how to navigate the various templates within Canva and really helps you have an overview of really how to navigate that software and build very creative, engaging flyers, social media posts, like I mentioned earlier, and really eye-catching material so that people pay attention and they're engaged with what you're communicating to them and that they understand it. And then lastly, our recommendation is to compare your data across time and really understand if there's any fluctuation as far as increases or decreases in any of the elements that you're collecting, that you are aware of it and you can take time and understand why that's happening. That will be incredibly beneficial for you. We want to encourage everyone to sign up and be a part of our listserv so that you can begin receiving all of our newsletters, all of our communications if you aren't already a part of this list. We also have a website that you are all invited to jump into and visit all of our tools and resources for the programs that we support. We also have a generalized email if you'd like to connect with us after today. We do look forward to hosting our next webinar in 2 weeks from now, which will be Tuesday, September 28th at 9 a.m. And we're going to be focusing on stakeholder engagement. We do want to thank all of you for joining us today. Heather, Janine, and myself are going to stick around for a few more minutes in case anybody has any questions, or if you want to have a conversation in relation to anything with data collection or implementation in general when it comes to evidence-based programs. But I will stop the recording now. And again, we will send out the PowerPoint to everyone, the recording, and please feel free to reach out to us, connect to us again. And we hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.